That leads us really nicely onto this kind of collaboration. I know it's said all the time, and it can't really be overstated that kind of collaboration is king. Although actually, we should probably say collaboration is queen today. But let's kind of dip into that. And yeah, if I can come back to you again, I mean, as part of the N1 Collaborative and the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium, how is that collaborative research going to help the rare disease community? Like, how do you see the power in bringing people together to collaborate?
So it's a great question. And I think the overarching answer is any research and any activity in this space will lead to more knowledge, more understanding, and the desire to do more. Many of these disorders are very small because the genes have just been recently identified and the community has just started out. There's not much known about the disorder. There's not much known about the function of the protein. There's not much known about the natural history of the disorder. So the more we learn about these disorders, and obviously the more patients we diagnose, and I'll talk about that a little later, the more interest there will be from companies like ours and other companies that are in the rare disease space to take on these disorders. We advise advocacy groups to own their research, to own their mouse model, to make sure that they have access to every piece of information that is available on their disorder, whether it's a mouse model, cell lines, a registry, natural history. If these organizations own their data and then are able to share it with whoever is interested in learning more about the disorder and working on the disorder and researching the disorder and developing a therapy, this will enhance every effort in this direction. The Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium was started to address ultra rare disorders that at the moment have no commercial interest. But as a byproduct, or maybe the main purpose is to develop a process that will enable many drug development efforts for many disorders. And maybe the byproduct is these small disorders will benefit from having a gene therapy. But having, as Peter Marks says, a playbook by which we can actually go back and see how to develop a therapy in a reproducible manner and not have to reinvent the wheel every time, that will shorten timelines and hopefully also make the development less expensive. The N-of-1 Collaborative is looking at it from a very different angle. Single patients are being treated, and the idea behind it is that every single patient that will have a clinical outcome, this will be recorded and shared with the larger community. And from this, we can learn how patients respond to specific therapies, not in a clinical trial setting. So it will be also, it will be interesting to see how this information adds up and we can use it to develop therapies. But the more research is done, the more information is available, then the more interest there will be and the more desire to develop therapies for these disorders.
Thank you. And I know Wendy, certainly as I've been working across this Women in Rare edition with your team kind of all over four the corners of the world, really realizing how much you collaborate as a company. You know, you would really do work together in that sense. You know, how can collaboration at a large scale like that kind of amplify the impact that we make? And how do we kind of sort of, I guess, lean in to drive the change together that we all get on board? Because I think it was important what Lara said about that, almost the danger of this fragmentation. Actually, we've got to start thinking bigger. We've got to have collaboration. So, but how can we do it on that larger scale to make the impact bigger?
Yeah, very good question. And also with, Mariana said we all need to be rowing in the same direction. On a really personal level, I've been privileged to work in rare diseases for over 20 years. And when I look back over this time, what connects me to these communities is the strength, power, and impact of women. It just stands out. Moms who become champions, patients who become scientists, caregivers who build consensus, drive research and drug development. They all deserve to be heard, but we have to get it out of just being in silos and really come to a collective stage. And the only way to make a significant and meaningful difference is collaboration at scale, locally, regionally, globally. It's up to all of us. Harriet Beecher Stowe said, "Women are the real architects of society." That does not mean women work alone. It doesn't mean there aren't amazing men driving rare disease innovation. It means it takes all of us, and we have to lean in and work together. In our rare disease world, I think this can be synthesized kind of with what Yale was saying and talking about proactively sharing data, sharing resources, building coalitions, creating the space to just do what needs to be done. But there's also a fundamental principle that in my experience, where things have really started to change is when we adhere to the principle that the most critical piece really starts with listening. So it requires allyship. It requires breaking down longstanding barriers and assumptions. Those have no place in rare disease. We don't have time, but also what we're doing doesn't work. Most rare disease clinical trials fail. So let's all just acknowledge we have to do more. We have to do it smarter. We have to do it better. And I think this collaboration, coalition, consensus-driven type of approach really makes a difference. We're also, and Yael talked about this a little bit, we're going to start seeing hyper customization in clinical trials with data coming in from diverse and steadily expanding ranges of resources and different ways that data are collected and analyzed and validated. There's a major increase in the use of remote or virtual data collection. All of these solutions mean that patients and women and caregivers are increasingly directing the collection of their own data and how it's used. So today, International Women's Day, the theme says it all. We will forge positive visibility of women. This means inspire inclusion and really forge a path to doing things differently, which is driven by collaboration.
Thank you, Wendy. That's such a lovely way to summarize that. And Mariana, what's the feeling in South America in the rare disease space? You know, what are the key barriers to research that you're finding? And I guess, or what also are the opportunities that you can bring? I mean, you mentioned a huge amount of work and studies that you're doing in terms of that collaborative piece.
Yeah, so I think there has been a lot of progress made in the rare disease space in the past years in Latin America, and I see more conversations around rare diseases, and people and governments are beginning to recognize the importance. But there are barriers to pretty much everything you can imagine, especially when you compare to high income regions. Our diagnostic odyssey is still over 10 years in most cases. And that has to do a lot with what we were talking about, where a mother goes to her primary care physician or even a specialist with concerns about her child, and she's dismissed as, obsessive or not believed. And this just contributes largely to these delays. But beyond that, there are so many complexities for patients to navigate our healthcare systems that are under-resourced and unequal in terms of access to specialized care, to get a diagnosis, and then eventually, a whole other challenge to have access to treatment if it's available. And then more on a policy level, there are challenges to implementing new financing mechanisms, finding the way to make coverage sustainable, building reference centers, to research, definitely. I mean, I think mainly funding, and we don't have enough clinical trials going on in Latin America. And we're trying to make this constant effort to highlight, the enormous capacity and talent and knowledge of scientists and researchers and physicians in Latin America. And I think this is very important, especially to recognize this, to bring more clinical trials to Latin America and advance in closing this gap between different regions. Also, I think, the diversity between the rare disease landscape in the different countries also creates a challenge for the region. We have different definitions for rare diseases, different stages in the regulatory process, for example. Some countries have very robust regulatory frameworks, while others don't have rare disease laws at all. We have different levels also of patient organization engagements. So this disparity between and really within the region's countries, creates its own challenges. Another challenge is, the changing political landscape that I mentioned before, and some of the health reforms that are going on in the region, which which, you know, sometimes threaten the progress that has been made. And we're constantly advocating to make sure that progress does not, you know, is not destroyed. But I think on the other hand, and on a more positive note, there's a growing sense of community and solidarity. Patient organizations have made enormous strides in the last few years. You know, they're increasingly organized, making their voices very crucial for policy and you know, to influence and advocate for better policies. And I think there's also this recognition of the importance of regional collaboration. So what we've been talking about, sharing knowledge, resources, best practices. So the countries that, you know, are not as advanced in their policy or patient organizations have really embraced the lessons learned and the best practices from other countries. And I think this has, you know, this has been very productive and is key for continuing the process.
Thank you. And Laura, I know you travel a lot. Have you noticed kind of differences in appetite to driving change across geographical borders? Do you see that difference?
I think so. I'm currently sitting in Liverpool in a hotel meeting room as we speak. So yeah, I travel more than I would like at the moment, but there is a definite change. There's more women around the table and up on stages on panels. There's definitely it's hard to say because I don't want to be negative, but towards 2018, 2019, there felt like there was real momentum building. There felt like there was going to be systemic change in terms of government funding, pathway recognition, the transition from childhood to adulthood in terms of care. All these things felt like they were starting to really have some significant change. And then, of course, we know what happened. We had the global pandemic. And I really feel like it set things back, not just to there, but to beyond. And I don't think we've recovered yet from that. And rare disease is not the priority that it was becoming. So I wish I could be a little bit more optimistic. But what change there is the change that's being driven largely by the people with lived experience, the people that are there in the kitchen table, ma and pa setups, the people that are there pushing for the clinical trials, that are working with industry. And also the voice of the lived experience is coming forward more. We're pushing for that to be considered as an equal stakeholder from conception to delivery to bedside. And that is changing. And that's changing because people have just taken steps forward without having to wait for government agencies and organizations. So where it's been down to the individuals, often women, there has been change. But unfortunately, we are for sure one of the group of victims of the COVID pandemic. And I don't see that changing for a good few years, unfortunately.
It definitely feels like it's kind of applied the brake a little bit. Wendy, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Because I know also you're a big globetrotter and you see lots of different ecosystems and how they're all interplaying. You know, is there anything you wanted to expand on with that from your experience? Oh, can't hear you there, Wendy.
I think I'm seeing more and more voices coming to the table together, which I'm hoping we can continue to amplify in this post-pandemic era. So it's less siloed around a specific condition or a specific area and many voices at the table sharing learnings across, whether it's a disorder or a group of disorders or a field in general. And I know that's something Yale's very invested in as well. So the more we can learn from each other, I think we're going to advance the conversation in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to kind of unpick that.
If you don't mind that I just
Of course,
add.
yeah.
So yesterday it was announced that the US government is going to allocate $6.5 billion to women's health, which is great for us as women. But I'd love to see the day where someone stands up and gives $6.5 billion for rare diseases. And this is our job, to make sure that what we're talking about here today percolates up and people understand that we're not adequately resourced to do all the work that we hope to do, and that we need these resources. And people like Lara who advocate, and Wendy who does it through the company, it's critical that we all, in every place that we are, that we talk about it, advocate, and make sure that people understand the need.
Agree.